Cold water crashes against unforgiving rock, a lonely bell tolling across the waves. This is the story of the island prison for dangerous women, a remote fortress built to contain the individuals society feared most. By the end, you will understand the true cost of isolating human beings far from the eyes of the world. What crimes could condemn a woman to such a place, and what desperate acts did isolation breed behind those walls? Do you believe a place can be designed to utterly break a human spirit? The Victorian era cultivated an image of the ideal woman as a gentle, pious creature confined to the domestic sphere. But this created a profound terror of her opposite, the so-called criminal woman who shattered every expectation. She was not just a lawbreaker, she was a social heretic. Her very existence threatened the moral foundations of society, sparking a panic that demanded an extreme solution. Ordinary prisons on the mainland were seen as insufficient, too close, too permeable to the world they were meant to protect. The public feared corruption, that the depravity of these women might spread. The answer was isolation, a place to banish them completely, far from the public eye and conscience. What kind of crimes could earn a woman a one-way ticket to an island fortress? It was rarely a single, monstrous act. More often, it was a pattern of behavior that marked her as irredeemable in the eyes of the court. Petty theft repeated with stubborn frequency, public drunkenness and brawling, or acts of prostitution that demonstrated a refusal to conform. Some were convicted of infanticide, a desperate act born of utter despair that was treated as the ultimate perversion of motherhood. The legal system pathologized their actions, interpreting them not as products of poverty or abuse, but as evidence of an innately corrupt and dangerous character. This perception sealed their fate. These women were deemed beyond reform, their souls too stained for redemption. They were labeled as manipulative, hysterical, and inherently deceitful, traits that made them unfit for even the strictest penitentiaries housing men. The state decided that society could not be cleansed until these elements were physically removed. The island prison was the ultimate expression of this desire, a geographical solution to a moral panic. It was a place designed not just to incarcerate, but to erase, allowing a nervous society to forget that these women had ever existed. But can you truly erase a human being by simply hiding them from view, or does the act of hiding itself create something new and far more volatile in the darkness? The prison day began not with a bell, but with a clang of iron that echoed through the stone corridors. Every minute was regimented, a brutal monotony designed to crush the spirit as much as the body. Inmates were roused from thin, vermin-infested straw in their cramped cells, spaces so narrow they could touch both damp walls at once. The cold was a constant companion, seeping from the stone into their bones. Privacy was a forgotten concept, with every basic human function observed and controlled. This was not a place for living, it was a machine for unmaking. Their days were filled with hard, pointless labor. Women were forced to work in the prison laundry, their hands raw and bleeding from scrubbing heavy, wet canvas in caustic soap. Others sat for 14 hours a day weaving coarse fibers into mats, a task that offered no skill, no pride, and no end. This work was not for profit or purpose, but for pure punishment, a way to fill the endless hours with physical exhaustion. The food was a special kind of torment, a thin gruel or a piece of hard, moldy bread that was often more inedible than nourishing. Hunger was a persistent ache, a reminder of their utter dependence on a system that viewed them as less than human. Discipline was swift and severe. The smallest infraction, a whispered word, a missed stitch in a mat, could mean solitary confinement. This was a fate worse than the crowded dormitories. They were thrown into lightless, silent pits for days or weeks, with only their own thoughts for company in the absolute blackness. The psychological torment was as calculated as the physical deprivation. Letters from home, if they arrived at all, were read and censored, the cherished words of children or parents often blacked out by an official's pen. This isolation from any loving connection was perhaps the cruelest cut of all. transforming the island from a prison into a living tomb, sealing them away from the world of the living. How does a person hold on to their identity when every reminder of who they were is systematically stripped away day after endless day? Among the sea of forgotten faces, a few names were etched into the prison's grim history with particular notoriety. One was Eliza Gray, a woman whose crime was one of cold, calculated precision. Before her conviction, she was a respected shopkeeper's wife, a figure of quiet respectability. But beneath that placid surface, authorities claimed, was a mind capable of meticulous planning. She was found guilty of poisoning her husband with arsenic, a death drawn out over weeks. The prosecution painted her as the ultimate schemer, a woman who used her domestic knowledge as a weapon, perverting the role of caretaker into that of executioner. On the island, she was known for her unnerving silence and piercing gaze, a woman who never confessed and who the guards watched with a strange, fearful respect. She was the embodiment of the feared murderess, intelligent and remorseless. Then there was Moira O'Connell, whose danger was not to a single person, but to the established order itself. A fiery orator and union organizer, she rallied women factory workers to strike for better conditions, her speeches igniting protests that turned violent. Her crime was sedition, a threat to the state itself. To the authorities, she was a political agitator, a virus of rebellion that could not be allowed to spread. In prison, she refused to be broken. She organized hunger strikes among the inmates and taught others to read by scratching letters into the grime of the cell floors. She shattered the stereotype of the hysterical criminal woman, replacing it with the image of a defiant political prisoner, her spirit unbroken by solitary confinement or forced labor. And finally, there was Sarah Jenkins, a woman whose crime was simply to live on her own terms. She dressed in men's clothing, took a series of lovers, and supported herself through gambling and fortune-telling. She was convicted not of a violent act, but of being a public nuisance and vagrant, a constant challenge to social norms. The court transcripts reveal a patronizing bewilderment at her refusal to accept her proper place. On the island, she was a paradox. She was both a disruptive force, constantly challenging the guards' authority with sharp wit, and a source of clandestine comfort for other inmates, reading their futures in stolen moments to offer a glimmer of hope. Her story asks a difficult question: was she truly dangerous, or was she just a woman the world could not understand and would not tolerate? These three lives, the calculated killer, the political firebrand, and the social outcast, reveal that the label of dangerous woman was often a cage constructed from fear itself. The same ocean that served as their prison wall also whispered of freedom. Escape was a near impossible dream, yet for some, the desperation to be free outweighed the terror of the attempt. The island itself was a fortress of nature's own design. Jagged cliffs rose from the churning sea, their surfaces slick with spray and seaweed. The waters below were a deadly maze of hidden rocks and unpredictable currents strong enough to drag a small boat under in minutes. Even on a calm day, the water was frigid, a cold that could sap the strength from the strongest swimmer in under an hour. To this, the authorities added their own defenses, a constant patrol of guards and watchtowers, their eyes scanning the coastline, and regular boat patrols that circled the island like hungry sharks. The geography was not just a barrier, it was an active participant in their captivity. How does one plan an escape from a place where the very environment is an enemy? The methods they devised were as ingenious as they were desperate. Some women became amateur cartographers, secretly mapping the guard rotations and tidal patterns on scraps of cloth. Others attempted to fashion ropes from torn bedding, hoping to scale the sheer cliffs under the cover of fog. The most common plan involved the laundry boats that brought supplies to the island, vessels that were searched meticulously upon arrival and departure. One woman, whose name was lost to the records, was discovered having painstakingly hollowed out a large loaf of bread, intending to use it as a flotation device for the long swim to the mainland. Another group spent months secretly pooling their meager food rations to create a stockpile, planning to steal a rowboat during a storm when the patrols were less vigilant. Their attempt was discovered only when a guard noticed the unnatural wear on a lock that had been tampered with using a stolen spoon. The consequences for these failed attempts were brutal and immediate. The perpetrators were thrown into solitary confinement for weeks, their already meager rations cut to near starvation levels as a warning to others. Yet there are whispers of success, stories passed between inmates like precious contraband. The most legendary tale speaks of two women who simply vanished one night during a violent winter gale. They were presumed drowned, their names added to the official list of casualties. But years later, an unverified report surfaced of a woman matching one of their descriptions living under a new name in a distant port city. The story claims they used the storm itself as their weapon, knowing the guards would be huddled inside and the patrol boats docked. They reportedly lashed themselves to a makeshift raft of driftwood and logs, trusting the furious currents to carry them farther from the island rather than dashing them against the rocks. Whether this story is truth or a myth crafted to sustain hope is unknown, but its power lay in its possibility. It proved that the ultimate human instinct for freedom could, on rare occasion, outmaneuver both iron bars and the relentless sea. What does it take for a person to risk everything, to gamble their life against a cold and unforgiving ocean for even a sliver of a chance? The island prison's grim legacy is not one of stone and iron, but of fear. It stands as a monument to an era that believed it could solve its deepest anxieties by simply banishing the source, a flawed and desperate attempt to purify society through geography. We are left with a haunting question, one that echoes far beyond the crumbling walls of that remote fortress. Was this a place designed for rehabilitation, or was it always meant to be a machine for pure punishment, intended to grind down the human spirit until nothing remained? The stories of Eliza, Moira, Sarah, and the countless unnamed women reveal a system less concerned with justice than with control, a desire to erase what it could not comprehend. Their lives force us to look beyond the simplistic labels of criminal and dangerous and to see the complex individuals trapped beneath. They challenge us to ask what we truly fear and how far we are willing to go to contain it. What do you think these forgotten voices from the past tell us about our own notions of justice and redemption? Share your reflections on this dark chapter of history in the comments below. If you are drawn to these explorations of forgotten and mysterious pasts, be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the shadows.